There are moments in life that freeze time. Not the big planned ones, not graduations or promotions or things you can put on a resume. The ones that catch you completely off guard. The ones where everything you've built and everything you've survived collides into a single breathless second and you realize the universe has a sense of timing you could have never scripted yourself. That's what happened to me on a gray Tuesday morning in March, inside a courtroom in downtown Savannah, Georgia. And before I tell you what went down in that room, I need you to understand where I started. Because this story doesn't begin with a courtroom. It begins on a cold porch step in a suburb outside Atlanta, with a 15-year-old girl clutching a plastic grocery bag stuffed with whatever she could grab in 5 minutes, standing in the dark completely alone. Before I go any further, if this story is already hitting something inside you, do me a real solid and hit that like button right now. I know it sounds small, but it genuinely helps this channel find more people who need to hear stories like this one. And if you're new here, welcome, please subscribe so you never miss what's coming next. I drop new stories every week and I promise they're worth your time. Now, let me take you back. My name is Alyssa Reeves. I am 33 years old. I live in Savannah, Georgia, and I am the Chief Deputy District Attorney for Chatham County. I have a 17-year-old son named Caleb, a small house near Forsyth Park with a porch I use more than any other room, and a career I built from the absolute ground floor up. Not because anyone handed me anything, but because I refused to let the first chapter of my life be the whole story. 18 years ago, I was 15 years old, newly pregnant, and being told to get out of my own house. The night it happened was late October. The kind of night that's already dark by 5 o'clock and smells like the first real cold coming in off the Georgia pines. I got home from school, Marietta High School just northwest of Atlanta, and I found Mom sitting at the kitchen table. Arms crossed. Face made of stone. Dad was pacing behind her with this slow, deliberate back and forth that made the floorboards creak on every step, like he was doing it on purpose. They had found the pregnancy test I'd hidden in the bathroom trash. Here's the thing about my parents, Victor and Sandra Reeves, both in their mid-40s at the time, they were not screaming people. I almost wish they had been. What they gave me was worse, that quiet, clipped, flat-eyed coldness that wraps around you like a freezer. Dad stopped pacing. Mom looked at me with an expression I had genuinely never seen on her face before. Not angry, but something past angry. Like she'd already moved into a place where I wasn't worth the energy of being angry at. "You've embarrassed this family," she said. Like she was reading it from a script. "You had every opportunity," Dad said. "And this is what you chose. You'll need to leave tonight," Mom finished. That was it. No questions. No "are you okay?" No acknowledgement that I was 15 years old and terrified and that the life growing inside me was also theirs, at least in the way that family things usually are. Just, "You'll need to leave tonight." I stood there staring at my own hands. The same hands that had taken a history quiz that same morning. And something in me went completely hollow. Packed a grocery bag. Clothes, my phone charger, the $22 I had in my desk drawer. Walked out the front door. And I stood on that porch in the Georgia cold, 15 years old and pregnant and completely, utterly alone. I had one place to go. One person. And she was the reason I'm still standing today. Grandma Clara. Clara Reeves. She lived about 6 miles from our house in a small white cottage on Powder Springs Road in Marietta, one of those older neighborhoods where the houses have deep front porches and the oak trees grow over the street and meet in the middle. She was 61 at the time, a widow for 12 years, and she made her own way in the world running a small homemade baked goods business out of her kitchen. Pound cakes, peach preserves, tea cakes, and her legendary red velvet cake that people in the neighborhood would pre-order a week in advance. She sold at the Marietta Farmers Market every Saturday and did custom orders by phone the old-fashioned way. She was the most no-nonsense, clear-eyed, deeply kind human being I have ever known in my life. I walked to her house that night. All 6 miles. In the dark. Crying most of it. When I finally got to her porch step and knocked on the door, it was almost 10 o'clock. I was shaking. My face was a mess. I was holding that grocery bag like it was the only solid thing left in the world. She opened the door, looked at me for maybe half a second, and said, "Baby, coming out of that cold right now?" That was it. No interrogation. No, "What did you do?" No lecture about mistakes or consequences or what the neighbors were going to think. She just stepped aside and let me in the way you open a door for someone who belongs there. She walked me straight to the spare bedroom, the one with the hand-stitched quilt on the bed that her own mother had made decades ago, the little nightstand lamp that gave off the warmest light you've ever seen, and the window that looked out over the backyard where her peach tree stood bare in the October night. She made me a cup of chamomile tea. She sat on the edge of that bed, took my hands in hers, rough, warm, strong hands, always faintly sweet-smelling from whatever she'd been baking, and she looked me in the eye and said, "You are not carrying this alone. Not as long as I'm alive. You hear me?" I had been holding it together by sheer stubbornness since I left that porch. The moment she said those words, every wall I had up crumbled completely. I cried so hard my whole body shook, and she held me and said nothing else because she understood that sometimes the most powerful thing in the world is just someone choosing to stay. That night, under that handmade quilt, I felt something I hadn't felt since I'd seen that little pink plus sign on the test. Safe. Just safe. School was its own kind of brutal. Marietta High is a big school. Big schools eat gossip just as fast as small towns do. I became the girl in about 3 days, the pregnant one, the one whose parents sent her away, the one people found reasons to walk around in the hallway. A boy in my English class thought it was funny to say something ugly in front of everyone one morning. I pretended I didn't hear it. But I heard it. Grandma Clara showed up every single day like she had always been there. She drove me to every prenatal appointment in her old Buick LeSabre, cream-colored, automatic, ran like a tank. She made me breakfast every morning without asking whether I wanted it, because she already knew I'd say no and she already knew I needed it anyway. She clipped coupons from the Sunday paper like it was part of her job description. She found maternity clothes at thrift stores in Marietta and washed and pressed them and laid them across my bed quietly, never making a big deal out of it. She refurbished a little wooden crib herself, sanded it down, painted it a soft warm white, put a little mobile over it that played "You Are My Sunshine." I still think about that mobile sometimes. And she did something else. Something I didn't find out about until years later. She started setting money aside, quietly, methodically, every single month into an account that had my name attached to it. She never said a word about it. I had no idea. But I'm getting ahead of myself. In those final months of pregnancy, we'd sit on her front porch after dinner, wrapped in blankets even in Georgia because November nights get real, and she'd ask me in that steady, unhurried way she had, "Alyssa, what do you want your life to be?" My world at that point was the size of a due date. I didn't know how to answer that. One night I finally said, "I just want Caleb to have more than I'm starting with." She squeezed my hand so tight. "He's going to have everything," she said. "Because you're going to make sure of it." Caleb came into the world in late March. 6 pounds, 13 ounces, black hair, the loudest cry you've ever heard in your life, like he had been waiting the whole 9 months to make an announcement. Grandma Clara was in the waiting room at Wellstar Kennestone Hospital in Marietta before I was even out of labor and delivery. The nurses adored her within 20 minutes. Everybody always did. When they put him in my arms, warm and small and squinting at the lights like they personally offended him, something happened inside me that I still don't have the right words for. Not just love, though it was that. Something bigger. Something that felt like purpose landing. Grandma Clara leaned over and whispered, eyes wet, "You did it, baby girl. Look at your son." I looked at Caleb. And I made a promise inside that bright hospital room that I have kept every day since. I'm going to build us a real life. No matter what it takes. No matter how long it takes. We are not staying here. People assume 15 and pregnant means the story is basically over. Mine wasn't over. Just got a whole lot heavier. I finished high school through the Cobb County Alternative Learning Center, a a continuation program that let teen parents move through coursework at their own pace while also being a parent. I did homework at Grandma Clara's kitchen table at 2 in the morning with Caleb asleep in his crib 2 rooms over. I turned in papers I had written between feedings and nap schedules and the 1,000 tiny crises that come with being 16 and a mother simultaneously. When I walked across the graduation stage in August, 2 months after the traditional ceremony, my own little ceremony with 40 other students, Caleb was 14 months old and sitting in Grandma Clara's lap in the 3rd row, wearing a tiny button-up collar shirt she had ironed herself. He had no idea what was happening, but he was clapping anyway because he clapped at everything back then. Mom and Dad did not come. I had told myself it wouldn't sting. I was lying to myself. Standing up there and looking out at all those families, all those mothers and fathers with their video cameras and their handmade signs, I felt something drop inside me that I didn't have a name for yet. Something between grief and anger, and mostly just the particular kind of loneliness that comes from being proven right about something you wished you'd been wrong about. But then I found Grandma Clara's face in that crowd. Her entire face was lit up. She was holding Caleb up so he could see me, both of them waving like I was someone worth waving at. And I kept walking. I got a job at a Kroger grocery store in Marietta right after graduation. Cashier, then shift lead, then night manager. Nothing glamorous. But I showed up every single day and I was not interested in standing still. Every time I punched that time clock I told myself, this is not where it ends. Money was the kind of tight that means calculating gas to the quarter mile. Buying the store brand of everything without thinking twice. Splitting Caleb's daycare costs with Grandma Clara without ever asking her to because she just did it. Praying the Buick didn't need tires this month. Then, when Caleb was almost 2, something happened that cracked my future wide open. A man showed up at Grandma Clara's door one afternoon. Slick presentation. Company truck with a magnetic logo on the door. He told her there was a structural issue with her foundation, her crawl space had a dangerous mold situation, and she needed to act immediately and put down a deposit of $2,000 before the crew could even come assess it. He had all kinds of official-looking paperwork, and he spoke with the practiced urgency of someone who'd given this exact speech 100 times. I was in the kitchen. I could hear the whole thing through the screen door. I watched this man try to manufacture fear in a 62-year-old woman on her own porch. Something in me went completely still, and then completely focused. I walked out and stood between them. And I looked at him calmly and said, "Sir, we won't be signing anything today. Leave your contractor's license number, your company's state registration, and a business card, and we'll contact the county to verify everything before any money changes hands. If you can't do that, I'd like you to leave the property." He left faster than he'd arrived. Grandma Clara looked at me for a long moment after his truck pulled away. Then she said, quiet but certain, "Alyssa, you need to be a lawyer." She meant it. I heard it. And I couldn't shake it. Law wasn't about suits and corner offices. Law was about exactly what had just happened on that porch. Someone using power and confusion and fear to take from someone who didn't have the tools to fight back. I had been on the wrong side of that equation my whole life. What if I spent the rest of it making sure other people weren't? I enrolled in Georgia Piedmont Technical College in Lithonia, a 30-minute drive, but they had the programs I needed and the schedule was flexible enough for a working mother. I studied on my breaks at Kroger, on the bus, at the kitchen table after Caleb was asleep. I took on a second job 3 nights a week cleaning an office building in Midtown Atlanta, and some nights I brought Caleb in a carrier strapped to my chest and he'd fall asleep right there against me while I pushed the mop bucket down the hall. I'd kiss the top of his head and whisper, "One day, buddy. This all becomes something." I also need to tell you about someone else who showed up around this time. Her name was Dominique Hale. She was a paralegal at a criminal defense firm in Buckhead, and she lived in the apartment directly across the hall from ours in the complex in Smyrna where Caleb and I had finally gotten our own place. She was 38, sharp, funny, and the kind of person who noticed things. She noticed I was always carrying a textbook. She noticed I was always exhausted and always studying anyway. She started tutoring me. then reviewing my papers, then connecting me to pre-law advisors at Georgia State and telling me exactly which internships would actually matter and which ones were resume filler. She never once treated it like charity. She treated it like what it was, a woman with resources choosing to use them. I would not be where I am today without Dominique. That's just the truth. 2 years at Georgia Piedmont, then I transferred to Georgia State University in Atlanta for my bachelor's. Caleb started kindergarten at Smyrna Elementary right around that time. He would bring home drawings of our apartment, always the same cast of characters. Him, me, and Grammy Clara. No one else. We never talked about Mom and Dad. Not yet. My Georgia State acceptance letter to the College of Law arrived on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the Kroger break room on my lunch break. I opened the email on my phone and read it 3 times. Then I put my phone face down on the table and sat there for a full minute just trying to breathe. Then I called Grandma Clara. She answered on the second ring. I couldn't get a full sentence out. She figured it out from the sound of me crying. "Oh, baby," she said. "Oh, baby." I knew it. That evening I drove out to her house on Powder Springs Road and she had already baked a pound cake. She didn't know I was coming. She just had a feeling, she said. So she baked. That was Clara. Law school was 3 years of the hardest thing I'd ever done, and I had already done some genuinely hard things. Georgia State College of Law does not coddle anybody. The reading load was relentless, the competition was intense, and I was one of the only students in my cohort who had a child and had started from a technical college. There were nights in the library when I sat with my textbooks open and genuinely wondered if I had made a catastrophic mistake. But I had not walked 6 miles in the dark at 15 years old and built an entire life from a grocery bag and a grandmother's kindness just to fold in a law library. I was not built for folding. I graduated 3 years later. Not first in my class. But I was there. I was done. I had a law degree. The Georgia bar results came on a Wednesday morning. I was sitting in the pickup line at Caleb's elementary school in Smyrna waiting for the bell. He was 8 years old when the notification hit my phone. I opened it. I read the word pass next to my name. I sat there in that pickup line and ugly cried in a way I had been holding back for years. Like fogging up the windows, full body sobbing. Caleb came out through the school doors in his little backpack and spotted me through the windshield and his face went immediately worried. He climbed into the back seat and leaned over the console. "Mama, are you crying? What happened? Is Grammy Clara okay?" I turned around and pulled him into the front seat and hugged him so hard his backpack dug into my shoulder and I didn't care even a little. "Nothing's wrong, baby," I said. "Everything is really, really right." He didn't fully understand, but he hugged me back just as hard. And that was enough. My first position out of law school was as a public defender in Chatham County. I had relocated to Savannah by then, which felt like a fresh start in the right kind of way, a smaller legal community where I could grow faster. 4 years in public defense taught me things no classroom ever could. How to actually listen to someone who had stopped believing anybody would. How to walk into a room that was stacked against you and find the one thing that could shift it. How to lose a case and still protect a person's dignity. Every win, no matter how small, put fuel in the tank. Then I moved to the district attorney's office. Assistant DA first. Then, 4 years after that, chief deputy district attorney for Chatham County. Grandma Clara drove 2 hours from Marietta to Savannah the day I got the appointment call. She showed up at my door with a pound cake, a card, and the biggest smile I had seen in years. Caleb, 14 and at that age where he was starting to act too cool for emotional moments but hadn't quite committed to it yet, hugged her for a full 30 seconds. Life felt, for the first time in a long time, like it had arrived somewhere it was supposed to be. Hey, if you're still with me, I need 30 seconds of your time right now. Drop a comment below and tell me what city you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I mean it, I read every single one and it genuinely amazes me where this channel reaches. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. It's free, it takes 2 seconds, and it means the world to a channel like this. Share this video too, you never know who in your circle needs to hear this story today. Okay, back to Alyssa. About 8 months after I got that chief deputy appointment, Grandma Clara had a fall. She was in her backyard on a Sunday morning in September checking on her peach tree. She'd been nursing it back from a rough summer when she went down. Her neighbor, Mr. Bivens, saw her from across the fence and got to her within minutes. He called 911 immediately. Caleb and I got the call while we were at Sunday brunch at a place in Savannah's historic district. I don't even remember putting money on the table. I just remember being in the car. She had a fractured hip and what the doctors at Wellstar Kennestone described as significant cardiac concern. She was 79 years old. Her body had been carrying a lot for a long time. I made that drive from Savannah to Marietta, nearly 3 hours, every weekend for the 8 weeks she was in the hospital and then the rehab facility on Johnson Ferry Road. I'd sit in her room in the afternoon light and hold her hand and we'd talk about everything, Caleb's latest school drama, what she wanted to do with the garden in spring, old memories, new ones. One afternoon in week 6, she got very quiet. She took my hand and held it differently than she usually did. Not the way you hold someone's hand in conversation, but the way you hold it when you want to make sure they remember the feeling. "Alyssa," she said, "I need you to know I am at peace." "Grandma, please don't." "I'm not being dramatic," she said in that dry, gentle way she always corrected me. "I'm being honest. I have had a full life. A good one. And the part of it I am most proud of, the part that means the absolute most, is you. Everything you became. Everything you built." She paused. "I am so proud of you, I don't have words big enough for it." I cried. She patted my hand like I was being a little silly about it. She passed on a Tuesday morning early. Quietly. Her own way, on her own terms. She was 79 years old. The service was held at Peace Lutheran Church in Marietta, where she had been a faithful member for over 45 years. The sanctuary was full. Former neighbors and farmers market regulars and folks from her Tuesday morning prayer group and people I had never met who each had a story about something Clara had done for them that they'd never forgotten. One woman pulled me aside after the service and told me Grandma Clara had slipped her $500 in a card the winter her husband lost his job. No note, no expectation of return. A man who ran the fruit stand next to hers at the farmer's market told me she had covered his fee one week when he forgot his cash, 3 years in a row, never keeping count. Another woman, her neighbor on the left for 30-plus years, told me Clara had sat with her every single day for 2 months when she was going through chemotherapy, always bringing food, always staying until dark. She had been quietly holding that entire community together. Without fanfare. Without keeping score. Just because that's who she was. I drove back to Savannah that night feeling like something foundational had shifted under me. Like the ground I'd been standing on for 18 years had turned to water. About 12 days after the funeral, I got a call from Grandma Clara's estate attorney, a man named Albert Gaines, who had a small practice on Cherokee Street in Marietta, the kind of office that's been in the same building for 30 years and has actual paper files. He was soft-spoken and careful, the kind of man who has seen enough of life to know that you don't rush people through grief. He asked me to come in when I felt ready. I figured it was routine paperwork. Closing out accounts, transferring the title on her house, the administrative tail end of losing someone. I went in on a Thursday afternoon. Albert Gaines sat across from me with a folder on his desk. He offered me coffee. He closed the door. He folded his hands. "Your grandmother named you her sole beneficiary," he said. "Yes, I expected that," I said. "Whatever's there, I'll make sure." He looked at me over his reading glasses. "There's considerably more there than you might be thinking." He opened the folder and turned it toward me. Here's what I didn't know. Approximately 9 years earlier, a residential developer had contacted Grandma Clara about a narrow strip of undeveloped land behind her house on Powder Springs Road, about 1.5 acres of it partially wooded with a creek running through the back edge. The land had always looked like nothing. Overgrown. a dumping ground for fallen branches. An old rusted wheelbarrow had been sitting back there since before I was born. That developer had needed that exact strip for a project, and the Cobb County real estate market had been running hot. She had sold it for far more than anyone would have expected. And then she had taken every single dollar and put it into a managed investment account. And she had never spent a penny of it. Not 1 cent. For 9 years. Total in that account, principal plus growth, was $2.4 million. I read that number. I read it again. I looked up at Albert Gaines. He nodded gently, confirming what I was seeing. She had very clear instructions, he said. She told me, don't tell Alyssa. She'll insist I spend it on myself. I want her to build her own foundation first. When she has, she'll know exactly what to do with this. That was when I completely broke down. Not joy. Not relief. Something more complicated and more painful and more beautiful than either of those. Grief wrapped around gratitude so tightly you couldn't get your fingers between them. This woman had clipped coupons from the Sunday paper for 9 years. She had worn the same winter coat until it frayed. She had driven that old Buick until it needed a new transmission twice, and she'd fixed it both times because it was still running fine. She had done all of it on purpose. All of it for me. I sat in that office chair with my face in my hands and shook. Once things had settled and the estate was legally transferred, the first things I did with that money were 3. I established a scholarship fund for young mothers returning to education in Georgia. I donated to the Chatham County Legal Aid Society, which had helped me once with a custody matter when Caleb was 4 and I had nothing. And I donated to a nonprofit in Atlanta that ran job training programs for women coming out of the system, the same kind of program I had seen change lives during my public defender years. The rest I put in investments carefully the way Clara would have done. I didn't buy anything dramatic. I didn't tell many people. I just tried to handle it the way she would have wanted. And then, about 3 weeks after the estate settled, my phone rang. I was walking to my car in the parking garage under the Chatham County Courthouse on a Thursday afternoon. Unknown number. Something in my gut made me answer. Alyssa. A man's voice. Careful and familiar in a way that hit me somewhere physical before my brain had even caught up. Dad. I heard about Clara's estate, he said. I think we need to sit down and have a real conversation. I hung up. 2 days later, a certified letter. Mom and Dad's names in the return address corner. Typed formally. They claimed a legal interest in Grandma Clara's estate as her surviving family members. They expected communication within 30 days. They would pursue legal action if they did not receive a satisfactory response. No apology. No, Alyssa, we've thought about you every day. No acknowledgement of 18 years of absolutely nothing. Just a demand for money from the woman who had saved me when they threw me away. My hands were shaking so badly I put the letter on my kitchen counter and walked out to the porch and stood in the night air for 10 minutes just breathing, just trying to get my feet back under me. Then I called Dominique. Because I was a sitting officer of the court, an active prosecutor in Chatham County, I couldn't handle this myself. Clear conflict of interest on every level. I needed private civil representation. Dominique knew exactly who to call. She pointed me to a woman named Claudette Marsh, a civil litigation attorney with a practice in Savannah's Midtown District, specializing in estate disputes and family law. Claudette had a reputation that preceded her. Completely calm under pressure, absolutely relentless in a hearing room, zero interest in losing. I called her that same night. I walked her through the whole thing. The estate. The will. The 18 years of silence from my parents. Their letter. When I finished, she said, legally, they have nothing. They can't touch this will. But people with nothing to stand on can still waste your time and your peace. You ready to go through it? I have been going through it my whole life, I said. Fair enough, she said. Let's go to work. A week before the hearing date, my parents showed up at my house in Savannah's Ardsley Park neighborhood. I pulled into my driveway after a long day and there they were, on my front lawn like 18 years were just a misunderstanding that had finally been cleared up. They both looked older than I had been picturing in my head. Dad's hair had gone fully gray. Mom was thinner, more angular. They both had the posture of people who were used to being in charge of situations, but something about them looked tired in a way I hadn't expected. "We need to talk," Dad said. "There's nothing to discuss," I said. "Alyssa." Mom's voice was measured, controlled. "Be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," I said. "Which is why I'm going inside and closing the door." And I did. Inside, Caleb was at the kitchen table doing homework. He looked up at me and saw my face and went quiet. "Were those them?" he asked. "Yes." He thought about it for a second. Then, "What do you need right now, Mom?" "God, I love that boy." The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in March at the Chatham County Courthouse on Montgomery Street in downtown Savannah. The big old building with the columns and the wide granite steps, the one that looks like it has been standing there since the beginning of time because it more or less has. Kind of building where the weight of decisions feels appropriate to the architecture. Claudette and I walked up those steps together that morning. I was in a charcoal blazer, hair pulled back clean. She had her game face on before we even hit the sidewalk. Inside, the courtroom was already filling up. Word travels in a legal community. People from the DA's office, faces from the public defender years, community members who had known Clara. There was a particular quality to the quiet in that room, the expectant kind where everyone senses something significant is about to happen. My parents stood near the gallery rail with their attorney. His name was Thomas Hargrove, a civil litigator from a firm in Augusta, Georgia, polished and experienced and carrying himself with the air of someone who had never once doubted his own competence. Mom and Dad stood close beside him like he was a wall they were leaning against. Mom leaned over and said something to Dad. He chuckled softly. They were completely sure they were going to win. And then Thomas Hargrove walked in through the main courtroom doors. Here is what you need to understand about Savannah's legal world. It is a city big enough to matter and tight-knit enough that the prosecutors, the civil litigators, the estate attorneys, and the defense bar all know each other. Thomas Hargrove's firm had been co-counsel on a financial fraud case with our office 8 months earlier. He and I had been in the same conference room for 4 hours working through discovery. He knew my name, my face, and my position. He walked through those courtroom doors. His eyes moved down the room, and they landed on me at the respondent's table before they landed on anything else. He stopped, set down his briefcase, and said in the clear, easy, professional tone of someone greeting a trusted colleague, "Morning, Ms. Reeves. Good to see you. Ready when you are." Dead silence. Mom's hand flew to the gallery rail. Dad blinked once, twice, like someone had cut the lights. Their attorney, their weapon, had just greeted me like a colleague because that is exactly what I was. Hargrove caught himself, glanced between my parents' faces and mine, adjusted his tie with the quiet composure of a man who had recovered from worse, picked up his briefcase, and moved to the petitioner's table without another word. The woman at the table beside me, Claudette, leaned over slightly and murmured without moving her face, "Well, there it is." I said nothing. I didn't need to. The hearing was presided over by Judge Miriam Folo, a Chatham County Superior Court judge who had been on the bench for 14 years and ran her courtroom like a precision instrument. No theatrics. No wasted time. Kind of judge who has heard every angle and needs you to get to the point. Claudette was methodical in a way that left no gaps. She walked through the complete history of Grandma Clara's estate planning, every document, every notarized signature, every medical record confirming her clear mental functioning across the last decade of her life. She had a written statement from Albert Gaines confirming that Clara had communicated her intentions to him years before her death, consistently without any pressure or outside influence. Then she laid out the evidence of absence. 10 years of documentation. School enrollment records listing Grandma Clara as guardian when Caleb was a baby. Caleb's pediatric records from birth through age 6. Not one emergency contact form with my parents' names. My own legal correspondence from during law school, my bar application, my employment records. Not a single family reference that included Victor or Sandra Reeves in any functional capacity. 18 years of paper trail that confirmed, quietly and completely, that they had chosen to disappear. She placed one final document on the record. This is a handwritten note from Clara Reeves to her estate attorney, Mr. Gaines, written approximately 7 years before her death. Claudette's voice was even and clear. She writes, and I quote, "Everything I have is for Alyssa. She grew it herself. She deserves to keep it." Courtroom went absolutely still. Dad took the stand and tried. He said they had made a difficult decision during a difficult time. He said they had believed I needed to face consequences. He said they had assumed I would find my way without them. Claudette asked him how many times in 18 years he had checked on whether I had. He didn't answer. Mom took the stand. She tried tears. Claudette asked her gently and specifically how many of Caleb's birthdays she had acknowledged. How many holidays. Whether she had ever met her grandson. Whether she had sent a letter, made a phone call, left a voicemail. The answer to every single question was no. Would you describe those as the choices of a family that maintains a relationship? Claudette asked. Mom looked at her hands. Judge Folo had heard everything she needed to hear. This case presents no genuine legal dispute, she said. Clara Reeves executed a valid will with clear intention and full mental capacity. There is no credible evidence of undue influence. Petitioners have demonstrated no legal basis for their claim. The petition is denied in full. Denied. Mom made a small, sharp sound. Dad sat perfectly still, like something inside him had gone quiet. Hargrove closed his briefcase. He had done his job. He just hadn't had much of a case. Claudette put her hand on my arm. Done. I nodded. But done wasn't what I felt. I felt something more complicated. Relief and grief knotted together, and underneath both of them, something else. Something I hadn't expected. Sadness. Not for myself. For them. For how much of their own lives they had spent being proud of the wrong things. I took the side exit out of the courthouse. Needed the quiet. Needed air. The hearing had taken less than 2 hours, but it felt like it had compressed years into it. I heard footsteps on the steps behind me. I turned. Both of them. Together. About 8 feet back. Looking like the two people I had spent 18 years imagining having power over me and finding out they were just tired. Just two people in their 60s who had spent a long time being certain they were right and had just run out of road. Dad spoke first. "We didn't know," he said. His voice was quiet. The authority had drained out of it like water leaving a tub. "We didn't know who you had become." "You could have," I said. "You chose not to." He nodded. Didn't fight it. Mom's eyes were red, her makeup gone. "We were wrong, Alyssa. About all of it. About you. About what you needed. About what we owed you." Her voice broke on the last word, but she kept going. "We were wrong." I looked at them. Really looked, the way you look at people when you stop seeing the story you've told about them and start seeing just who they actually are. Two people who had let pride drive them into cruelty and had lived with the cost of that for nearly 2 decades. They weren't monsters. They had just been small and frightened and too stubborn to say so, and that combination had done an enormous amount of damage to a 15-year-old girl who had needed them. "What you did shaped my whole life," I said slowly. "Every fear I carried. Every hill I had to climb that I shouldn't have had to climb alone. Every night I lay awake scared I wasn't going to be enough for Caleb. All of it runs back to that October night." They held my gaze. Neither of them looked away. "But it also drove me somewhere I'm proud of. And it brought me to a woman who gave me more love in 18 years than most people have in a lifetime. I paused. So I don't know how to hate you. Believe me, I've tried. I just can't. Mom pressed her hand to her mouth. We're not asking for anything, Dad said. Not the money. Not forgiveness. We just needed you to know that we know. We see it. And we're sorry. I looked at them for a long moment. Take care of yourselves, I said. And I walked down those granite steps and out into the March air. Caleb was home when I got there. I walked in and he was standing in the kitchen pretending to make a sandwich, but I could tell from the way he moved that he had been watching the door for the past hour. You're back, he said. Well, we won, I said. The breath that came out of him was so deep and so relieved it was almost funny. Good, he said. They didn't deserve. They're still your grandparents, I said. He made a face. Are they, though? Because they've never once. Sit with me a minute, I said. He pulled out the chair across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where I had helped him with third-grade spelling and eighth-grade algebra and every hard conversation we had ever needed to have. People can be cowards for a long time, I said. And sometimes they do real damage from that cowardice. What they did was wrong. I'm not cleaning that up. But holding on to bitterness like it's a prize, that's not what Grandma Clara would have wanted. And honestly, that's not who I want to be. He was quiet. That sounds exactly like her, he said finally. Because she said it to me, I said. About them. When I was about your age. We sat at that table for a long time. Just the two of us. The house felt different that evening. Not lighter exactly, but like something pressing in on it from the outside had finally lifted its weight. 8 days after the verdict, an envelope arrived at my house. Real paper, real handwriting, my mother's cursive on the outside, the same script she had used on forms and permission slips when I was a little girl who still needed those things signed. I stood at my kitchen counter for a long time before I opened it. Inside one page. No legal language. No positioning. Just words. Alyssa, we were wrong. We chose our pride over our daughter and we have been carrying that every single day since, even when we pretended otherwise. We cannot undo it. We know you don't owe us a thing. But if there ever comes a day when you might be open to just talking, we are here. Truly sorry. Mom and Dad. I folded it carefully and set it on the counter. Caleb came in from the other room, read it over my shoulder without asking permission the way teenagers do, and sat down across from me. What are you going to do? I honestly don't know yet, I said. Whatever it is, he said, it's your call to make. Not theirs. I sat with it for 2 weeks. Thought about it on my morning commute down Abercorn Street into downtown Savannah. Thought about it on lunch breaks looking out the window of my office in the Chatham County Courthouse. Thought about it on the porch in the evenings with a cup of tea the way I always did my hardest thinking. What would Clara say? I closed my eyes one night on that porch and let her voice come back to me. Baby, forgiveness isn't about whether they deserve it. It's about whether you want to keep hauling it around. I picked up my phone. It rang twice. 3 times. Then Mom's voice, smaller than I had ever heard it. Nothing like the woman who had spoken to me in that kitchen at 15 like I was an inconvenience to be removed. Hello? Mom, I said. It's Alyssa. A sharp inhale. Then quietly, sweetheart. That word. It landed somewhere in my chest that I hadn't expected to still be tender. Not because I was ready to erase everything, but because I remembered being 15 and needing to hear it so badly, and here I was at 33 and it still carried weight. I'm willing to meet once, I said. Somewhere public. Yes, she said immediately. Anywhere you want. Whenever you want. Thank you. We met at a diner on Wilmington Island, just east of Savannah. A low-key spot with vinyl booths and sweet tea that came in mason jars and a view of the marsh through the window. Neutral ground. No history. They were already in a corner booth when I arrived. Hands on the table, sitting up very straight like people who were not sure they were allowed to be there and were trying to prove they deserved to be anyway. I slid into the seat across from them. Nobody spoke for a moment. A server came and set water glasses down automatically. Nobody touched them. Dad cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming. We really didn't think you would." "I almost didn't," I said. But I decided I didn't want to give the past more real estate in my head than it's already taken. Mom nodded slowly, like the words had landed somewhere real. "We've had a long time to think. We know there's nothing we can say that makes any of it okay." "No," I agreed. "There isn't." We talked for nearly an hour. Not about the estate, not about the lawsuit, about the actual years. About what those 18 years had looked like from where I was standing. About Caleb, who he was, what he was like, the person he was becoming. About Grandma Clara and what she had meant and how much she had quietly sacrificed that they had never known about. They listened. They didn't defend. They didn't try to explain themselves out of anything. At one point Mom said, barely above a whisper, "We didn't know Clara was doing all of that for you." "She didn't do it so people would know," I said. "No," Mom said. "She never did anything for recognition. That was Clara, even as a girl." She paused. "She was always the better person in the family. When I left that diner, we were not healed. We were not family in any full sense of the word. The distance between who they had been and who I needed them to have been was not something that closes over a glass of sweet tea. But we were not enemies. And for the first time in 18 years, we were in the same room with something other than weapons between us. That felt like enough of a beginning." On my drive back from the diner, I stopped at Bonaventure Cemetery on the eastern edge of Savannah. The old one, the beautiful one, draped in Spanish moss with the stone monuments and the ancient oaks that arch over the paths like something out of a dream. Grandma Clara was buried there, at her own specific request. She'd seen a photo of it once and said, "That's where I want to be. That looks like somewhere worth resting." I had stopped at a roadside stand and bought a bunch of sunflowers because that was her favorite flower, and I had told myself too many times while she was alive that I'd bring them next time. I set them against her headstone and stood there in the late afternoon light, the kind of gold-toned Georgia light that only happens in March when the sun is still low. "I hope I handled all of it the way you would have wanted," I said. "Not just the courtroom. All of it." The wind moved through the Spanish moss overhead, that long, slow shift that sounds like something breathing. Closed my eyes. What I felt in that moment was not victory. Not even relief exactly. It was something quieter and more complete. Peace. Kind that doesn't come from winning anything. Kind that comes from finally being able to set something heavy down and walk away from it without looking back. She had given me the foundation I had built everything on, and I do not only mean the money, though that was real and I will never be careless with it. What she gave me was the experience of being seen. Completely, clearly, without condition. Of someone choosing to step into the gap when everyone who was supposed to be there had stepped away. Of being told, with actions, not just words, that I was worth showing up for. She had believed it about me until I could believe it about myself. And now it was on me to carry that forward. Every case I take to trial. Every young woman I encounter in the system who needs someone in her corner. Every kid who ends up in a courtroom who needs someone to look at them like they are more than the worst thing that happened to them. That's what she left me. Not just the money. Purpose. I walked back through the cemetery in the fading afternoon light, under the Spanish moss, past the stone angels and the iron gates, and I thought about Caleb at home probably raiding the refrigerator and texting his friends and living the completely ordinary, completely secure, completely hopeful 17-year-old life that I had promised him in a delivery room in Marietta when he was less than an hour old. I kept that promise. We kept it together. Life did not give me the beginning I deserved. But I built the life that I did deserve. And I would do every single difficult, exhausting, terrifying part of it all over again. Before you go, this matters. This story reached something in you. If any part of Alyssa's journey connected with something you've been through or someone you love has been through, please don't just close this video. Hit that like button right now. Takes 1 second, and it is one of the most real ways you can support this channel and help these stories find the people who need them. Drop a comment below. I genuinely want to know, what city are you watching from and what time is it where you are right now? I mean it. I read every comment, and the places this channel reaches genuinely moves me every single time. Late night in Houston? Sunday morning in Detroit? A lunch break in a small town in rural Georgia? Tell me. And please subscribe if you haven't already. This channel exists to tell the stories of people who were handed the hardest starting line and built something real and true anyway. If that matters to you, and I believe it does because you're still here, then you belong in this community. Hit subscribe. It's free and it means more than you know. Share this video with one person today. You know exactly who I'm thinking of. The one who's in the middle of something hard and needs to be reminded that the first chapter is not the whole book. 'Cause it isn't. Where you start is just the first line. You write the rest. Thank you for being here. See you in the next one.